She had exactly $43 in her bank account, a 4-year-old asleep in the next room, and a pain in her side that was quietly trying to kill her. Before we go any further, if stories like this one move you, if they remind you that the people who deserve your love aren't always the ones who share your blood, take just 1 second. Subscribe. Hit the like button. Because what you're about to hear is one of the most quietly devastating and ultimately powerful stories I've ever had the privilege of telling. Her name was Claire, 37 years old, a 3rd-grade teacher, a single mother doing everything on her own, or so everyone around her believed. The truth was far more complicated. For 7 years, 7 long, quiet, invisible years, Claire had been holding up an entire family on her back, writing checks she couldn't afford, transferring money she didn't have, sacrificing not just her savings, but her silence, her dignity, her right to fall apart. And on the one night she finally did fall apart, the people she had carried for all those years let the phone ring. This is her story, and I promise you, by the end of it, you will never look at the word family quite the same way again. Claire grew up in a house where the word sacrifice was used like a currency. Her parents, her father, Raymond, and her mother, Diane, said it constantly. We gave up so much for you. We sacrificed everything. As a child, you don't question those words. You absorb them. You carry them forward like a debt you were born owing, without ever seeing the invoice. So when Claire became an adult, she paid. She taught 3rd grade at a public school outside Denver, Colorado. $54,000 a year. Enough? Just barely, if she was careful. If she didn't have obligations pulling at every paycheck before she even cashed it. Her marriage was already fraying at the edges. Her husband, Marcus, worked oil contracts in Alaska. 6 weeks away, 2 weeks home. They were trying to hold something together across a distance that had stopped being geographic long ago. And Claire was doing it alone, with 4-year-old Jamie, a full school schedule, and weekend tutoring sessions at $4 to $5 each just to fill the gap. The gap that existed because every single month, a significant portion of what she earned quietly left her account before she could breathe. Here's what 7 years looked like in plain numbers. It started in March of 2019. Raymond had been out of steady work for 3 years. Diane worked part-time hours at a dry cleaner that were anything but consistent. They'd moved into a 2-bedroom apartment 20 minutes away. The rent was $1,450 a month. Claire covered it. Every month. For 7 to 9 months without a single interruption. She also carried both their names on her car insurance policy. $340 a month. For 84 months. When Diane needed knee surgery and the insurance fell short, Claire wrote the check for the remaining $9,200 without being asked twice. And then, there was the $12,000. In the summer of 2021, Raymond called with what he described as a time-sensitive opportunity. A house. A good neighborhood. A closing window. He just needed $12,000 for the down payment. He'd pay it back within 18 months. It was practically guaranteed. Claire didn't have $12,000 sitting around. She had an emergency fund, the one she had built dollar by dollar over years, the one she told herself was for Jamie, for the unexpected, for the kind of crisis that comes without warning. She wired the money on June 14, 2021. She saved the confirmation email. The subject line she gave it, in her own quiet way, read, "Down payment, as discussed." 18 months passed. She asked once. Raymond said the refinance hadn't cleared yet. 24 months passed. She brought it up at Thanksgiving. Diane said the timing wasn't right. After that, Claire stopped asking. Not because she had given up, but because every time she raised it, the conversation ended with her feeling like the one who had done something wrong. And she was so tired. So deeply, bone-tired of feeling guilty for asking about her own money. So she did what she always did. She absorbed it. She added another tutoring session. She bought Jamie's sneakers on clearance. She told herself it would work itself out somehow. What she didn't know then, what she wouldn't discover until October, was where that $12,000 had actually gone. It started like most Friday nights. Claire had gotten home from her last tutoring session just after 7:30. Jamie was already in pajamas. She heated up leftovers and let him watch 30 minutes of television before bed. He was asleep by 8. She stood in his doorway, watching the soft blue glow of his nightlight fall across his little face, and she thought, okay. Another week done. We made it. At 7:40, she felt the first twinge. Sharp. Low on the right side. Sharp enough to stop her mid-step. She told herself it was a cramp. Took ibuprofen. Sat down. By 8:15, the pain had doubled. Then tripled. She was sweating. She couldn't find a single position that made it ease. She had dealt with pain before. This was different. This felt like something tearing from the inside out. Her first thought was not herself. It was Jamie. She picked up her phone and called Lisa, Jamie's daycare teacher, whose number she'd been given at the start of the school year for exactly these kinds of moments. Lisa answered on the second ring. Claire told her what was happening. Lisa said, "Where is Jamie right now?" Claire told her. Lisa said, "Call me back the second you know more. I'll be ready." Then Claire called her father. He picked up on the second ring. She told him, the pain, the possibility of the ER, Jamie asleep in the next room. She asked if he and Diane could come over. Just in case. He was quiet for a moment. And then he said, "I want a quiet weekend, Claire." 4 seconds. That was how long she was on the phone with her father before he hung up. She sat with that. She told herself she must have misheard. She called Diane. Diane listened. And then she made a sound, that particular sigh Claire had heard her entire life. The one that didn't need words. The one that said, "You're inconveniencing me," without having to use a single syllable. "Just call a babysitter," Diane said. "I don't know why you always do this." She hung up. At 8:34 in the evening, a text arrived. "You should have planned better." Claire stared at that sentence for exactly 2 seconds. And then, before she called 911, before she did anything else at all, she took a screenshot. Some quiet, clear part of her already knew she would need it. She called 911 at 8:51. By then the pain had spread across her entire abdomen. The paramedics arrived at 9 o'clock. She called Lisa from the stretcher. Told her Jamie was home alone. Lisa didn't hesitate for even half a second. "I know someone," she said. "She's worked with children for 9 years. I trust her completely. Give me 20 minutes. The woman Lisa called was a woman named Rosa, 44 years old. She arrived at 9:28. Jamie didn't wake up. Lisa stayed until Rosa was settled and the door was locked. No one had asked her to. Nobody required it of her. Claire went into surgery at 10:15. The last person she spoke to before the anesthesia took hold was a nurse named Gail, who asked if there was anyone she should contact. Claire said no. She woke up at 5:47 in the morning. The room was quiet. The October sun was just beginning to press through the window. She lay still for a moment, taking inventory. The 4 in her hand. The pull across her abdomen. The particular silence of a hospital at dawn. She picked up her phone. 17 missed calls. Lisa. Rosa. 2 colleagues from school. Her neighbor down the hall. Nothing from Raymond. Nothing from Diane. 1 text from Diane, sent at 11:23 the night before. "Hope the surgery went okay." Claire read that sentence 3 times. "Hope the surgery went okay." Not "I'm on my way." Not "I'm so sorry." Just, "hope." Dispatched like a form letter to a distant acquaintance. She set the phone down. She looked at the ceiling for a long time. Long enough for the light in the room to shift slightly. Then she opened her banking app. The automatic rent transfer, $14.50, set to go out on the 1st of every month the way it had for 7 to 9 months, she cancelled it. For the first time in 7 years. She called the insurance company from that hospital bed. Requested that Raymond and Diane be removed from the policy. 30 days to process. But it was done. No anger. No tears. Just clarity. The kind of clarity that only comes when something finally stops pretending to be something it isn't. When Claire came home, Rosa was still there. No one had asked her to stay. But she had, because, she said, Jamie had seemed unsettled, and she hadn't wanted to leave him with a rotation of strangers. The kitchen was clean. Jamie's laundry was folded on the couch. and Jamie himself was sitting on the floor in his blue pajamas, coloring in a book, completely unbothered, completely unaware that anything had gone wrong. Rosa looked up when Claire came through the door. "He had oatmeal this morning. He asked for you twice." Claire had to turn away, because a woman who had never met her son before Friday night had stayed through an entire weekend to make sure he was okay. And the people she had written checks to for 7 years couldn't manage a 20-minute drive. In the days that followed, Claire rested. And she dug. She pulled up the wire confirmation from June 2021. $12,000. Then she pulled the county assessor records, public information, available to anyone. The house her parents had purchased, bought in August 2021 for $287,000. The down payment on record came entirely from her parents' own savings account. $14,500. No trace of her $12,000 anywhere near it. She sat with that for a very long time. Then she called her brother, Nathan, who lived in Florida, called on birthdays, sent cards, and had somehow never been expected to contribute a single dollar to their parents' well-being. He picked up on the third ring. She told him what she'd found. He was quiet longer than felt comfortable. Then he said, "I knew about a debt, Claire. Dad had a problem for a while. A few years back. I thought it had been handled. I didn't think he'd gone to you for it." A pause. "I'm sorry. I should have told you." She thanked him. She hung up. She sent herself an email at 2:14 in the morning, one hand typing while the other was still bruised from the 4-line. 612 words. Every fact, in order, with dates. She titled it, "For the Record." And then, on October 14th, 11 days after the surgery, Raymond called. He didn't ask how she was. He didn't mention the hospital at all. He said the rent transfer hadn't gone through. Was something wrong with her bank? She said no. He said, "So, what's going on?" She said, "I'm still recovering, Dad." She hung up. Diane called 40 minutes later. Left a voicemail. "Your father is worried. Call us back when you're feeling better." Not one word about October 3rd. Not one word about the surgery or Jamie or any of it. Just, "Call us back when you're feeling better." She saved the voicemail. Then, on the 21st of October, there was a knock at her door. Lisa Crane stood on her porch, holding a small paper bag, a coffee, and a receipt she wanted to return, $23.50 for the taxi she'd taken with Jamie the night of the surgery. She'd paid out of her own pocket and hadn't said a single word about it for 3 weeks. She handed it to Claire and said, "I don't want this back. I just want you to know I kept it because what you did that night, making sure Jamie was safe before you let yourself go under. That was extraordinary. I wanted to say that to your face." Claire told her to come in. They sat at the kitchen table. And that is when Lisa told her something that made the room tilt slightly beneath her feet. Lisa attended the same church as Diane. And she had been there on the Sunday morning of October 12th, 9 days after the surgery, when Diane had stood before a table of 6 women and described her daughter. She called Claire ungrateful. She said Claire always manufactured crises to make people feel sorry for her. She said Claire had money for hired help, which obviously meant she didn't need her parents. She said the whole situation had been blown completely out of proportion. And then she said something that Lisa had immediately written down in her phone, word for word, in the parking lot the moment the gathering ended. "I don't know where we went wrong with her." Lisa showed Claire the note. The timestamp read 9:52 a.m. October 12th. Claire looked at those words for a very long time. While she had been in that hospital bed, while she had been making decisions about her son's care from the back of an ambulance, while she had been waking up alone in a recovery room, Diane had been in a church hall, preparing her defense, building a story, telling it to anyone who would listen, before Claire ever had a chance to say a single word. And then Lisa told her one more thing. Marcus, Claire's husband, still in Alaska, had called after hearing about the surgery from a colleague. He had called Diane's phone because he hadn't wanted to frighten Claire if she was already under. Diane had taken the call. She had told him Claire was fine. That Jamie was with family. That Claire didn't want to be bothered. Claire went very still. She called Marcus that same evening. He confirmed everything. He had trusted Diane's word. He had believed Claire had it handled, that calling her directly would just add to her stress. I woke up alone, Marcus, Claire said. There was no family there. There was a stranger who stayed out of kindness and a daycare teacher who paid for a taxi out of her own pocket. That was who was there. The silence on his end lasted 11 seconds. I'm sorry, he said. I should have called you directly. I didn't know. Over the next week, Claire built the folder. She printed every bank statement. 7 to 9 months of rent. 84 months of car insurance. The $9,200 from Diane's surgery. All of it on paper in front of her. She printed the wire confirmation from June 2021. She printed the county assessor record showing no trace of her money. She printed Diane's text from October 3rd, timestamp visible. She printed Lisa's note with the phone timestamp. She put it all in a plain gray folder. No title. No label. Just the truth, in order. And then the Christmas invitation arrived. A printed card. Formal. Raymond and Diane were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary at Christmas. A party. 30 people. Family and friends. We hope you'll join us, sweetheart. Claire called Lisa that evening. Told her about the invitation. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, "Are you going?" Claire said yes. "Will you come with me?" The night of the party, Claire parked 2 blocks from her parents' house. Lisa was in the passenger seat. They sat in the car for 8 minutes without speaking. Warm white Christmas lights glowed in the windows. The kind Diane chose deliberately. From 2 blocks away, they could hear the soft drift of voices and music through the cold December air. Claire was wearing a navy sweater. Diane had once told her navy was her color. Lisa asked, "Ready?" Claire said, "I've been ready for 2 months." The room was full. 31 people in the end. Aunts, cousins, church friends, neighbors, and her brother Nathan, standing in the corner with a glass of water, who looked up the moment she walked in and held her gaze for 3 full seconds before looking away. Diane saw her from across the room. She smiled warmly. Then she saw Lisa standing beside her. Something crossed her face. Quick. Barely there. Gone in half a second. The quiet calculation of someone who suddenly realizes the evening is not going the way they planned. She recovered immediately. Claire, sweetheart. And Lisa, how wonderful. Her voice didn't waver, but she didn't move toward them. For the first hour, Claire ate, made small talk with cousins, admired the Christmas tree, watched Raymond refill glasses and laugh too loud and never once look in her direction. Diane worked the room, telling the story of 40 years together. The ups and the downs, the way families hold each other up, the beauty of sacrifice and love. The church women nodded. Diane's sister smiled warmly. Everyone in that room had already heard Diane's version of Claire Mitchell. Claire sat at the far end of the room and let them have that hour. Then Diane picked up her glass and tapped it gently with a spoon. The room quieted. She said she wanted to say a few words about family, about the love that sustains 40 years of marriage, about sacrifice, about showing up, even when it's hard. And then, whether from nerves or from a failure of self-awareness so complete it had become its own kind of courage, she said, "We hope our children know how much we've given up for them." Raymond's sister started to clap. Lisa stood up. She did it slowly. No raised voice. No drama. She simply rose from her chair, and the room went uncertain. "Diane, do you mind if I say something?" Diane's smile didn't move. "Of course, Lisa." Lisa spoke clearly and without a single hesitation. She said she attended First Grace Community Church. She said she had been at the Sunday morning gathering on October 12th, 9 days after Claire's emergency surgery. She said she had sat at the same table as Diane. She said she had listened while Diane described her daughter as ungrateful, as dramatic, as someone who manufactures crises for attention. And then she said she had heard Diane say something she had written down in the parking lot the moment it was over. She held up her phone. Not reading from it. Just showing it existed. "I don't know where we went wrong with her." I wrote it down immediately afterward. The timestamp says 9:52 a.m., October 12th. The words are exact. The room was completely still. Diane said, "That's not." I didn't mean it that way. Lisa said, I wrote it down right after, Diane. The words are exact. Diane turned to Claire. Tell them I didn't mean it like that. Claire picked up her water glass, took one slow sip, set it down. Then she opened the gray folder. October 3rd, 9:13 p.m. She read the words without inflection. You should have planned better. This was sent while I was sitting in the back of an ambulance. The room didn't gasp. It just stopped. Every conversation, every clink of glass, every ambient sound, gone. She set that page aside. March 2019 through October 2025. $1,450. Rent. Every month. She set a page down. 7 to 9 months. Another page. Car insurance. 2 names. $340. 84 months. Another page. Diane's knee surgery. 2023. $9,200 after insurance. She looked around the room. She wasn't reading to wound them. She was reading because for 7 years, these numbers had existed only inside her bank account, and inside a silence that she had learned, slowly and painfully, was something other people could feel even when they pretended not to. Raymond said, this isn't the time or the place. Claire said, you sent the invitation. He didn't say anything else. She placed the next page on the table. June 14, 2021. $12,000. Wire to your account for the house down payment. She paused. She set down the county assessor record. The down payment on this house is listed on public record as coming entirely from your savings account. No portion of it corresponds to the $12,000 I sent. Diane's hands were folded in her lap. She was looking somewhere to the left of Claire's face. From the corner of the room, Nathan stood up. He didn't speak. He just stood. It was the only thing that needed to happen. Diane's eyes filled. Her lip trembled. She raised one hand to her mouth. That gesture. That particular gesture Claire had watched redirect rooms her entire life. The trembling lip. The glistening eyes. The unspoken invitation for everyone to feel sorry for the person being held accountable rather than the one doing the holding. But this time, no one looked away from Claire. Pamela pulled her purse onto her lap. Diane's sister had stopped nodding. Claire set the final page down. Not a document. Just a question. Marcus called from Alaska the night of my surgery. He called your phone, Mom. He was worried. He wanted to know if I was okay. A pause. What did you tell him? Diane said quietly, I told him you were fine. You told him I didn't want to be bothered. He has the message. He told me himself. She looked at her mother steadily. I woke up alone in the recovery room. The nurse asked if there was anyone she should call. I said no, because I didn't know that Marcus had already tried to reach me and that you had sent him away. The silence in that room was complete. Claire closed the folder. She didn't take it with her. She stood up. She looked around once, at the church women who had heard Diane's version of this story over coffee 3 months ago, at Pamela, at Diane's sister, at Nathan, who gave her the smallest nod she had ever seen. She said, Merry Christmas. Then she turned. Lisa followed. The door closed behind them. Gently. The way you close a door when you know you're not coming back. Outside, the air was cold and clean. The warm white light still glowed in the windows. Claire stood on the sidewalk and breathed. Her phone buzzed. Nathan. I should have done this years ago. I'm sorry. She didn't reply right away. She looked at the house one last time. Then she got in the car and drove home to Jamie. The practical aftermath came quietly, without ceremony. The car insurance lapsed. The rent was now their full responsibility. These were not disasters. They were simply the ordinary adult weight of paying for your own life. The weight Claire had been carrying for them for 7 years. Diane sent an email. 3 paragraphs. No apology for October 3rd. One lengthy attempt to explain that the $12,000 was more complicated than Claire understood. Claire read it once and filed it in a folder she labeled for the record. Pamela texted to say she was sorry for only ever hearing one side. Claire replied, Thank you. That was all. Nathan called on a Saturday in January. They talked for 4 to 5 minutes. Jamie sat on Claire's lap for part of it, and at some point called Nathan Uncle Nathan for the first time. Nathan laughed, a real, surprised, warm laugh. Claire thought they might actually build something from what was left. Marcus called twice more. Neither conversation reached resolution. He asked if they could really talk, not about logistics, but about everything. Claire said, not yet. But maybe. And she meant it as honestly as she could. Some doors don't close all the way. They just stop swinging. On the morning after Christmas, Claire woke up early. Jamie was still asleep. She stood in the kitchen and made coffee and watched the pale January light come up slowly over the backyard. The Colorado winter sky, that particular cold, clean blue. She stood there and she thought about the 7 years. Not with anger. Not anymore. Just with a clear-eyed acknowledgement of what they had actually been. She had given genuinely, and with full intention. She had written those checks because she believed in showing up for people. Because she had been raised to believe that family is a commitment that doesn't come with conditions. She still believed in showing up. That part of her wasn't gone. She didn't want it to be. What was gone was the belief that showing up for the wrong people is the same as being loved. On the first Saturday of the new year, she didn't have a tutoring session. For the first time in years, she didn't need the money the same way anymore. She and Jamie made pancakes. He got batter on the floor, on his shirt, on her arm, and on the imaginary dog he had apparently decided they now owned. He laughed until he was out of breath. Rosa came by in the afternoon with a bag of oranges and no particular reason. Lisa texted to ask if they wanted to go to the park. And Jamie looked up at her at some point in the middle of all of it and said, "Mommy, are you happy?" She looked at him for a moment. "Yeah, buddy, I think I am." And she didn't need to check whether that was true. For 7 years, she had believed that if she gave enough, showed up enough, stayed quiet enough, eventually the ledger would balance. That the people she had carried would be there to catch her if she fell. She was wrong. But she doesn't regret being the person who shows up. She just learned, finally, at 37 years old, in a hospital bed with an 4 in her hand and a screenshot of a text message that said you should have planned better, to stop showing up for people who had already decided she wasn't worth the trip. You build family. Sometimes you build it with the people who share your blood. And sometimes, you build it with a daycare teacher who pays $23.50 out of her own pocket on a Friday night and doesn't say a word about it for 2 weeks because she didn't want you to feel indebted. The gray folder lives in her desk drawer now. She doesn't think she'll ever need it again. But she keeps it there, because the truth was spoken out loud, in a room full of witnesses, and it exists now somewhere outside of silence. And that is enough. Have you ever been the one who always showed up, always covered the gap, always found another way, and then one day realized the people you were doing it for had never once planned to do the same for you? Tell me in the comments. I want to hear your story. And by the way, where in the world are you watching this from? Drop your city or country below. It means everything to see how far these stories travel. Subscribe for more stories about standing your ground and reclaiming your life. The gray folder stays in the drawer. But she walks lighter now. And if you're somewhere in the middle of that silence right now, carrying a weight that was never meant to be yours alone, I hope this reminds you of something simple and true. You are allowed to stop. You are allowed to let the ledger be exactly what it actually is. You are allowed to walk out of the room.